Seemed like the floodgates had opened against NC State football at the end of last week, but over the weekend, it appears that the cavalry is on the way.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Monday episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Monday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Kenton, as we discussed at the end of last week, we had actually not 3, but 4 defensive backs enter the transfer portal up against that deadline. It's funny that Bishop Fitzgerald actually announced right after we had finished recording our episode. So there were 4, not 3 DBs that went into the portal. Of course, that was Cisse, Cooley, Fitzgerald, and Boykin. Over this past weekend, NC State football was able to replace one of these pieces with freshman Jiren Sensabaugh. Now, Jiren Sensabaugh joins NC State from Missouri. NC State was very high on Sensabaugh out of high school, so it's yet another situation where State missed the first time, but they connect on the second try.
Yeah, and he was listed as a 4-star recruit out of high school. He's the son of Jiren Sensabaugh, who is a Tar Heel, by the way. Good to see that some good decision-making got spread down that lineage at some point in time. But in all seriousness, he's a heck of a player, man. He's 6 feet tall. He's got long limbs. He's rangy. He flips his hips well and all that good stuff. He's shown flashes. It's about the consistency with Sensabaugh. It's about, hey, can he lock in and do it right every time? And I think that he can. I think under the right tutelage, he can absolutely flourish into being a really, really high-level player. And what would seem like overnight to some people. But again, when a guy is toolsy, this is why you take chances with a taller guy that can run a little bit. Because if he turns out to like, hey, he's got the goods, he can do all these different things, and he can tie it together, he can be a very good corner in the ACC, potentially one of the top guys. So I'm interested in seeing, kind of how they use him, how Coach Elliott's scheme employs him, because, I can't imagine that they'll use him as like just a, hey, you're going to be hanging out in the flats. Anything that comes over here, disrupted. I can't imagine they'll use him that way with all the range and length that he has.
This was an interesting situation to me because I did just mention that State was really high on Sensabaugh coming out of high school. But for NC State having to replace their defensive coordinator, meaning that Sensabaugh probably has no prior engagement with DJ Elliott. He only really knew Tony Gibson and Coach Mitchell here at NC State. But to get this commitment for DJ Elliott, it's a big deal. And I think on the other half of that, that shows you that Sensabaugh has his commitment to the culture of NC State. He's buying into the school and what this program is doing, even more so than what this particular new coach is doing in DJ Elliott. So that was cool to see. And the second part I want to talk about is the speed at which this process took place. Jiren announced that he was going into the portal on Saturday evening, and by Sunday, he was committed to NC State. So not only was he committing to the culture in the program, but he knew it instantly. And I think that represents a situation where, one, he probably had some type of realization over the course of this season that he would rather be at NC State than Mizzou, meaning that he kind of wished he could have chose this the first time. But two, once the portal was on the table, he knew NC State was on the table. And I think this is a definite great take for NC State at this point in the cycle. Kenton already told you, former 4-star recruit, very long corner, very rangy corner, and can do a lot of different things. And I think that speaks to his versatility in what will be a new system, the hybrid 3-4 at NC State under Elliott. Great take. I think all NC State fans should be very pleased with this get.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's important about Jiren Sensabaugh and kind of who he is as a player is when you talk about the systems where you would need guys that have like a bunch of different abilities and can do many things at a high level, you're definitely looking at Elliott's system. A lot of why, and we'll get into this a little later, I'm sure, but a lot of why his numbers are not very good is because his defense isn't very complex. It's not. is literally predicated on, hey, make the plays you're supposed to make, corners match up with guys and run with them at a high level because, I mean, his defenses are by and large man coverage. And I know what you're thinking. Well, if his defense is by and large man coverage and they don't do anything complicated, what's the point of even having a defensive coordinator? The thing that is supposed to be Elliott's calling card is the execution and the technique. It's supposed to be, hey, his guys don't miss a ton of tackles by and large. His guys are not missing assignments often and all that. It's just that, again, you need it's never about your X's and your O's. It's always about your Larrys and your Joes. And if you look at his previous stops, despite the fact that they don't look good on paper, I mean, again, I want you to tell me where you see a team that has the best talent in their conference. Do you think Kentucky is in the upper half of SEC talent?
No.
Okay, what about Colorado? 2017,
no.
2018, upper half. Kansas in the Big 12,
no.
Upper half talent? Okay. So Temple was the closest that I would say, hey, he's had the ability to where the talent discrepancy is not massive. And there, I mean, again, not great numbers, but much better than some of his previous stops. So I look at this situation and I say a guy like Sensabaugh is going to be important to Elliott because, again, if you play for Elliott, you're going to play some man defense. You're going to have some times where it's like, hey, that guy's your guy. You and him all night long, swing your partner round and round. Y'all got to do this thing out.
And I think on the topic of versatility as well, kind of coupling back on what we finished with last week, in the announcement that Cisse and Boykin and Fitzgerald and Cooley are all moving on, it's very easy to find yourself irritated, and we're going to talk more about NIL deals here in just a little bit, but it's irritating to come to the idea of like, why now? Why would they leave us hanging right now? And then you freak out. Now the secondary's gutted and we have a new defensive coordinator. What kind of excitement can really be conjured up here? It's important to understand that nearly everyone is replaceable. And I say that with all due respect to every single player involved. But that's just the reality of the situation these days. With the transfer portal and the unlimited use of the transfer portal, everyone is replaceable, or nearly everyone is replaceable. You lose 4 guys, not only are you going to have to get 4 new guys, but you can have 4 guys that maybe do things a little bit differently than the 4 guys you lost. And when you're bringing in a defensive coordinator, perhaps you can find guys that fit that system better than they would have. And maybe that's a stretch, but you get what I'm putting down here. So I think finding Jiren Sensabaugh at this point of the cycle, it's a really good get because he has that high upside, and he also has 4 years of eligibility, being that he redshirted this season at Mizzou. And maybe nowadays you can't really bank on keeping someone for 4 years because it's going to get increasingly more rare, but I'm very happy with NC State landing Jiren Sensabaugh. And again, his father played in the NFL a number of years. That's a great lineage to come from. NC State should be very pleased with Jiren Sensabaugh running with the pack. And of course, more to come. We had 2 commitments from Temple on Monday. We'll discuss those on Tuesday's podcast. Coming up next, we're going to get into Mailbag Monday, playing a little bit of catch up from the end of last week. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are now officially here, and they're made that much better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That's right, $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That first $5 bet no longer even has to win right now. You just have to place one. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Head on over to FanDuel.com in order to join today, and you'll get started with $200 back in bonus bets by just placing a $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com in order to get started. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Middle portion of our Monday show. Now time for Mailbag Monday, playing a little bit of catch-up from last week, bleeding into this week. We have 6 total comments, broke them into 2 segments of 3. So without further ado, here we go. First one comes from Chuck Lander. They say, do you think the offensive call making was partially from Dave Doeren? It may not matter who the OC is in this position if he's being controlled by another person. I see tons and tons and tons of comments about this, not just on our channel, but all across social media. And I understand why people feel this way. I think when you're looking at Dave Doeren's tenure over 12 years, and you're looking at all the offensive numbers put up, not just by Robert and I or Tim Beck, but every single coordinator you've had under Dave Doeren, more or less, it's kind of the same product year after year. And so that gives people the impression that Doeren is, he has his hands in the offensive playbook, or he's telling guys what they can and cannot call. That's not exactly the case, because Doran's not helicoptering over his coaches and saying, hey, we need a run here on third down only. None of that is happening. But here's why I think it does matter. We've said this on here countless times, but Coach Doeren has a way that he likes to win a ball game, in that he kind of prefers to win ugly. He wants to score some points early and then sort of squat on a lead. He wants to rely on his defense to close that out in the second half. Unfortunately, there's countless instances of that not being effective enough. And you look at the Boston College loss in 22, or multiple losses to Wake Forest, or any other painful loss you want to insert into this conversation. His overall philosophy, I think, is a bigger issue than who is calling the plays. Now, that also doesn't absolve Robert and I from any blame, because there was several, probably way too many instances of incompetence from a coaching standpoint. Like, just for example, Hollywood Smothers not touching the football in the entire third quarter of the ball game. That's on the offensive coordinator, not on Dave Doeren. That is on Robert and I, just to name one of countless other examples. But to summarize here, Coach Doeren is not directly involved with the offensive call making, but his overall philosophy, that has influence on what's going down.
A lot of people talk about whether or not Dave Doeren is handicapping these offensive coordinators and all that. And it is possible that that's the case. However, there is an outlier that I think kind of disproves this. Eli Drinkwitz, when he took over offensive coordinator duties, the first year NC State was 9th in the conference in offense. They never finished outside the top 4 again. He was the offensive coordinator here for 3 years, 2016, 2017. Or I'm sorry. Yes, 2016, 2017, 2017, 2018, and 2018, 2019. And in those years, NC State finished 9th in offense in his first year. In his second year, NC State finished 4th in the conference in total offense. In his third year, they finished 3rd in total offense, behind only Syracuse and Clemson. So it is. I'm not going to say that Doeren has 0% influence and he's not, making some decisions that are a little questionable here. But we have seen when a guy is cooking, Doran's going to let him cook. If an offensive coordinator is doing great things, Doeren knows to get out the way and let that offensive coordinator do those great things.
Next one comes from Mike J. He says, this offseason reminds me a lot of, I believe, 2015, when Dave Doeren was starting to face pressure and they told him to make changes to the coordinators. I believe that was when he brought in Drink, which it was. We just noted that. But he was definitely starting to feel the heat at that point, and this reminds me of it. Yeah, I mean, hard to disagree. I think when you're going into an offseason where, Tony Gibson moves on, so you're going to have to replace a defensive coordinator anyway, but also to relieve Anai of his duties and have to also replace the offensive coordinator, coming off of a very disappointing season when the expectations were so high. Spoke about this when these decisions came down last week, but both of these hires, to many people, they do feel relatively uninspiring. And I get it. When you face a tough season like this one and you have to, right the ship in a very short amount of time, you're looking for big names. And when you don't get those relatively big names, you're like, well, are they thrown in the towel? Does this signify the beginning of the end? We don't know for sure, but in my unexpert opinion, it kind of signifies that to me. I say all that to say, when things don't go the way you want them to, and especially as far off a base as we were in this season, when you wanted to have goals as far as playing for a championship, you absolutely had to make changes whether you wanted to or not, because it forces the issue. Back-to-back bad seasons for Dave Doeren, I think we probably have a relatively good idea of what that means.
Yeah, and in terms of Coach Drink and what that season was, do y'all not remember when people brought in Coach Drink, everybody wasn't super geeked about that hire? Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. There was more optimism around that hire than there is surrounding Roper's promotion. But, everybody wasn't super geeked about that hire. And this is very much so a parallel situation. These are very much so staring each other down in the eyes, saying, oh, we're at about the same place now, aren't we? Now, the question is, what does Doeren do at this crossroads, right? It is the old law of the wolf where it's like when you expect the least, you get the most. And to be honest, I was going in the next season before our basically entire starting defensive backfield got in the portal saying, you know what, 6 games, 7 games is my expectation. I've dropped that down to about 5 now. And in year 13, I know 5 games is going to get Doran fired. And obviously, nobody wants to get fired. Nobody wants to have that on their record. Nobody wants to have that be the situation and how they go out. So I'm obviously sure that Doran is doing all he can to right the ship here. But this is very much so. It's not identical to that situation. Not identical, but they're siblings. These situations are definitely siblings.
I think we're very quickly coming up on a situation where there is really no gray area. It either works and we move forward, or it doesn't and we don't. It's really feeling like that's the only 2 options that the 2025 season will produce. So none of us really know until then. We're just going to have to wait and see. That's the reality of the situation here. Next one comes from Def Jam. DJ Elliott had Kansas in 2019, 122nd in the country in opponent points per game. In 2020, he had them at 127th, giving up 46 points per game. I do not have the warm and fuzzies right now. So this is exactly what we were just talking about. If you go back and you look at the numbers over the course of DJ Elliott's career as a defensive coordinator, the numbers are not going to give you the warm and fuzzies. They're not going to inspire you with a ton of confidence. But here's what I think where the selling point is for NC State fans. You lose Tony Gibson, and there was a lot being made of the 3-3-5 scheme. Although a hybrid 3-4, which is what DJ Elliott runs, is not that far off from a 3-3-5, it will mix up looks. It will give you 4-man fronts in addition to mixed looks out of a 3-man front. It's going to give you opportunities to force a lot more pressure than the 3-3-5 was. So at the absolute least, you're going to get a different look at some of the capabilities of the guys that you retain. Like, for example, Trevally Price or an Isaiah Shirley. You're going to see these guys in different situations that might provide more success than they were having at the 3-3-5. I think that's really the main selling point, because if you get wrapped up in the numbers with DJ Elliott, yeah, you might find yourself lost.
Remember that whole talent thing I was talking about in the previous stanza, Grayson?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what do you think Kansas did in 2021 when DJ Elliott was no longer there? How many points do you think they gave up?
Probably not that much of a difference.
They dropped from 127 to 129th in the nation.
Yikes.
The year before that, come on, Grayson, talk to me. What do you think Kansas allowed in terms of points per game in 2018?
I'm going to say 40 plus again.
30.4.
Oh, wow.
Oh, but that was only good for 80th. So, like, congratulations. You went from being a very bad defense to being one of the worst in the nation. And, you know, the only thing that I will say is concerning about DJ Elliott is I have not seen a track record of very good recruiting. And that's something that out of my coordinators at the college level, I need to see. I need to see guys that can win on the couch. I need to see that. Other than that, you know, again, if I put you in a situation where you are going to be in one of the worst situations in the nation, I'm not expecting you to go out there and turn chicken scratch into Bojangles. Like, that's just not how that works out, you know. And although some people would argue that Bojangles taste like that, I'm not arguing that. I think Bojangles is all right, especially with a little bit of honey mustard. But you get the point. This is, you know, I get it. DJ Elliott, on paper, does not look like a super exciting hire. Neither one of these look like super exciting hires. All I'm asking, reserve judgment till we see the product, you know. And again, this is coming from somebody who believes this team will win somewhere between 5 and 7 games next year. So, and am I saying that that's good enough? No, not in year 13. Absolutely not. No. But I believe that's where this team is right now. Hopefully I'm proven wrong. Hopefully I look up and I'm like, well, damn, Coach Doran's done it. He's finally got his 10-win season or whatever. But that's what I see out of this right now.
Yeah, if you were looking for a solid pep speech on this Monday, perhaps this is not the place for you, but it just keeps circling back to the idea that it's either going to work or it won't work. And if it won't work, then I think you're going to see it all kind of blow up in the end. But until that point, we won't know if this is a good or bad hire until they take the field this coming fall. Coming up next, we're going to break into our second half of Mailbag Monday. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Our second Monday sponsor is Gametime. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before. I can remember the excitement of the past playoff games and can't wait to make more memories with the new updated format. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks, and it makes getting tickets to all of your favorite live events easier than ever before. Filters out all of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, and you won't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I used Gametime Picks for an upcoming game, and browsing through all of their deals was a breeze. I found great value in all the kinds of seats around the venue, and their super deal in particular stood out as the best value for the entire event. I love that I can see the seat views before buying, and the app will show you your total cost up front with no surprises at checkout. The on-time ticket delivery and the lowest price guarantee gave me all the peace of mind I could possibly ask for. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, and again, create an account and use redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Second half of our Mailbag Monday, diving right back into it. This next one comes from Wolfpack NBA. They say, I guess I'd like to understand how these guys can sign NIL deals and then walk away. Can we get a segment in the future on that? Go Pack. So yes, this is in reference to Cisse, Fitzgerald, Boykin, and Cooley, who all had signed with Savage Wolves to come back in 2025, but then elected to enter the transfer portal at the very end of that deadline at the end of last week. So here's the deal on NIL. To my knowledge and to my understanding here, but I think a lot of folks kind of get confused on when players are signing these, they're not receiving lump sums up front. So like, for example, let's say it's like $75K. If I'm signing on the dotted line for $75K, I'm not receiving that lump sum up front or really anywhere close to that. But how NIL works is essentially it's a future agreement, meaning that the player agrees to attend, autograph signings or public events or anything of that nature, and that is how they get paid. If they don't appear to those events, they don't get paid. If they enter the transfer portal, the contract is then voided. So it's definitely not a situation like, let's just say TaMarcus Cooley, for example. He didn't re-sign, get paid a ton of money, and then bolt like a bandit. He didn't rob us blind and hit the transfer portal. That's not how it works. But these contracts are binding to the collective, but not the player. So there's no breach of contract and there's lawsuits galore. None of that's going on. If they stay here, they play here, and then they participate in all the events that they are supposed to, that is how the player gets paid. I hope that can help with any possible confusion.
And this is why I say that players need to unionize for a multitude of reasons, not only for the players' sake and benefit, but also for the school's sake and benefit, for the benefit of the game and for the benefit of the fans. To have those announcements come out and then less than 2 weeks later have like, oh, actually, psych, LOL. It's a very rough time for the sport right now.
Yeah.
And if there was a formalization of this process to say, hey, the portal window is the portal window. If you want to leave, you can leave. But please be aware, you cannot sign and get fans' hopes up to say, oh, man, I love watching Cisse cover. He's one of the best to do it. Great. He's coming back to my school. Lovely. Oh, wait, he's not coming back? When did that happen? Having that situation where everything is ironed out in a way, pros don't have this much freedom. Even if they sign a one-year deal for whatever the case may be, it wouldn't be like this. And we often talk about NIL was not meant to be pay for play, nor should it be. It's too late. That's what it is. That's what it is now. So let's fully take this thing to where it is, because let's be honest, this is not amateurism anymore. Amateurism is me and Grayson throwing around a baseball. That's amateurism. Nobody wants to see either one of us try our best to hit one out of the park. That's just, it'd be very embarrassing, and people would look at me like, wait, that guy got a Division I scholarship in any sport? I'm a football player, not an athlete. There's a difference. But anyway, in all seriousness, I look at this and I say to myself again, if we make this fully built out and bolstered out, we're in a better situation. Because again, right now what we're seeing, one-way contracts. Right now what we're seeing is, like Grayson said, the collective is responsible to the player, And technically, the player's responsible to the collective via way of if you don't show up, you don't get paid.
Right.
But to me, it's like, again, you've created a situation where you are getting fans and coaches and teammates hope up alike to then dash those dreams last minute. Because let's make no bones about it, this was very last minute. All of these guys left within 6 hours of the portal closing. Yay or nay, Grayson?
That's correct.
So this isn't a situation where it's like, hey, they let folks know day one. It's just a situation where I'm all for players having empowerment. I'm all for players having the ability to move and go, but I'm not for players having the ability to enter into one-way agreements virtually. And again, I understand it is two-way because if the player doesn't show up, he doesn't get paid. But again, for the sake of roster planning, for the sake of fandom, for the sake of the love of the game, it still feels one-sided in that, hey, I can sign but still leave.
Yeah, the system is heavily flawed, but unfortunately, this is the system that we've been dealt. And I always kind of said when NIL and the transfer portal got reworked, or this is like 4 years ago now, there should have been like a gradual progression of both of those things. But instead, they just kind of ripped the Band-Aid off or ripped open Pandora's box, and then all hell broke loose. And that, unfortunately, is why we stand where we currently stand. But in summary, in the future, when you see a player re-sign to Savage Wolves, that essentially is just like a verbal agreement that they have signed. They have expressed that they want to come back to NC State and participate in not only everything football-wise, but off the field as well with Savage Wolves. That's what that is. It's just a verbal agreement that they want to come back. But until that happens, you can see a guy step away and elect to enter the transfer portal like we learned 4 times the hard way at the end of last week. Directly relating to what we were just talking about, this next one comes from Joseph Williford. Any word if this is just NIL stuff or unhappy about the coaching changes? Hard to say, although I think it very well could be a little bit of both. All 4 of these players, you're looking at Cisse, Cooley, Fitzgerald, and Boykin. I think Boykin's a little bit of a different situation because he was injured for the entire year, but Cisse, Fitzgerald, and Cooley all had very solid years for NC State. Now, they are coming off of a defense that finished 6 and 7, but you look at Cisse, he was the top-graded corner on the entire team. You look at Cooley, came on strong in the middle of the year. Cooley had several game-changing turnovers, and Fitzgerald was a stalwart of the back half of that secondary all season long. It could be that all 3 of them are looking at what they put on tape this year, what they did on the field, and say, well, I feel confident in my abilities. I wonder if there are bigger fish, so to speak, that also feel that same confidence, like an SEC team or Big 12, Big 10, whatever it may be. It could be just looking for greener pastures. Or the other half, perhaps that they are upset that Tony Gibbs is moving on. They don't feel like they fit well into a DJ Elliott system. So schematically, they could feel like they're better suited to play elsewhere. It could be one. It could be the other. It could end up being both, but it is what it is. This is the system we're dealt. And like I said earlier, everyone is replaceable. NC State will go out and find their guys to fill in these spots, and we'll move on forward.
I'm going to tell you, Grayson is absolutely right. It's some of both. It's some of both. It's some of guys looking for bigger paydays, which is fine. But there's also guys that are not exactly happy about the hiring of Elliott. But again, this is not – I don't think this is something that there was a clear answer to solve for any of these. Because there have been times in the past where I'm like, there's a clear answer to this. And the clear answer is just pay this guy more money or whatever the case may be. I don't think that there are any right now where I'm like, hey, I know for a fact there's a clear answer to this. I've heard different whispers about different things. I don't want to say anything that's not true, but what I have heard from everybody who's talked about this is it's more of a combination of both than just 100%. Oh, these guys don't like the coach, or this is just a ploy for more money, whatever the case may be. So it's an unfortunate situation, but it's the situation of college football now.
Last one comes from Mike Jones on Twitter. This is basketball related. They say, I think it's clear some things need to change with men's basketball. Rotation isn't getting it done. So I will begin by saying, full disclosure, hand up, I did not watch the basketball game on Saturday. 18-point loss to Wake Forest. Now, I had other things going on that I was not able to watch, but I also would be lying to you if I told you I was 100% inclined to see what we would do. Our basketball team, much like we saw last season, it's heavily flawed. offensively, now all of a sudden defensively, when that was the strong point of the season, it's getting to be another disconjointed mess. Now, I have not watched the game. I just said that, but looking at the box score, I can tell you we were out rebounded. We had more turnovers. We didn't shoot well in general from three or at the foul line. And to Mike's point here, the rotation for Kevin Keats' team is still up in the air. We're getting into mid-January, and this is yet another team that cannot figure out how they are best suited rotation-wise. I don't think Wake Forest is a world beater by any means, but you could tell they have their rotation figured out. They only played 7 guys for the entirety of the game. NC State played 12. 12 different players on the court in this game, and none of them really had a great game. Your leading scorer was Marcus Hill with 14 points, but then you had B2H with 9, Jaden Taylor with 6, O'Connell with 10, Middlebrooks with 4. It's scattered all over the place. And I think that continues to ail this team. When you don't know who your leading bucket getters are, you don't know who your leaders are, or perhaps the leaders that you're supposed to have are not playing at a high rate right now, it's a mess. This is a problem that is going to continue as we get deeper into ACC play. And we all know how that ends because it almost happened before the ACC tournament last year.
The reality of this team and of this game is simple. You cannot get off to a start like what NC State did and expect to come back. This game started 19-4.
Yeah.
We could not throw a rock in the ocean to start off this basketball game. When you spot a team a 15-point lead, you cannot, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to come back from that. You're just not, especially with our offensive deficiencies. You're not going to be able to come back from that, which we were not. I think that it's a very poor showing by Keats, not only in the inability to shorten your rotation and get the guys who are doing good things in the game. I think it's also a black eye on Keats in terms of this game started out with you getting absolutely boat raced. Because I don't believe that it was even halfway through the first half when they were up 19-4. So I'm looking at this situation and I'm saying to myself, we're only about 7 minutes into the game and we've already dropped down 15 points. Man, come on. All right. The rotation isn't getting it done. The coaching performance isn't getting it done. The effort isn't getting it done. The shooting performance isn't getting it done. This team is just not getting it done.
Back-to-back losses in ACC play for the men's basketball team, but certainly no time to feel sorry for themselves. They welcome Notre Dame to the Lenovo Center on Wednesday in desperate need of righting the ship. That'll do it for us here on Monday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button, drop your comments in the comment box, mash that subscribe button if you have not already. Tell us your thoughts on getting Jiren Sensabaugh back with the Pack now. Previously very close before committing to Mizzou, but he calls Raleigh his home now in 2025. Anything else you have on your mind, drop those in the comment box as well. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Tuesday for more. And until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.